So I did that meditation specifically because there's a few things that I'm going to talk about in relation to kindness to self. I've got about 5 words in my head that need to be discussed, not many, but, and then you guys we can share and ask questions. But so the first one is presence, and presence is what we were just doing just then. It's that being in the moment, being aware of that space that's the witness, the part of you that's always conscious, always aware, watching the thoughts as they come and go. It's pretty, maybe I'm not meant to. Did anyone have moments of, even if it was moments of where the brain was empty, but you were aware that you were still aware? Hey?
Not quite empty, ever empty.
Not quite ever empty.
No.
It comes after a while. Yeah? The more you do this, the more you start to realise that there's this space that's the background, which is what mindfulness is all about actually, that is ever present. That's consciousness. That's your inner spirit, really. Okay? It's the essence of everything. And after a while of practicing, so what used to happen for me, I was just working on meditation, working on the breathing, which calms the body down, right? It really activates or slows down, the blood pressure, the heart rate, everything, right? It releases muscle tension. But your brain waves also start to slow down from this very busy beta state, which most of us are in, okay, to a much slower state called the alpha state. And it gets deeper than that too, to theta. And as that starts to happen, the whole body calms down. And by the way, it's extremely good for your physical health, okay? So things like mindfulness has been definitively proven to reduce blood pressure, strokes, heart disease, autoimmune disease, improve your immune system, diabetes, osteoporosis. Seriously, it is phenomenal for your physical health. Even reduces the denaturing of our DNA and prevents Alzheimer's disease. So physically it's fantastic, right? Because we're normally running at this slightly over-vigilant, sympathetic stimulation state, okay? So it's calming that down. But the other thing is, it's incredibly good for our mental health, and there has literally been thousands of studies to show that now, okay? It reduces depression, anxiety, stress. But the other thing that starts to happen is, which people don't realise so much, is that as you get quiet, this wisdom starts to come through. Okay, you start to get aha moments and you start to live more from this space, okay? And that's what so what happened for me when I was first, I've been meditating since I was 18, but I really got into it probably 10, 12 years ago, okay? And initially I was just noticing the calming, noticing that I was feeling better, but then I went away for this weekend with my lovely husband, Dan, and I really focused on the trees actually and the earth. And I just started to get this awareness of presence, of this background, that it wasn't the thoughts, it wasn't the emotions, it was this essence that we all are, right? Which is spirit, which is, or our heart, whatever you want to call it, right? So, and that, believe it or not, is loving. Much more loving than this very judgy mind, okay, that's full of who we think we should be, meeting expectations, doing all that stuff, okay? So a kindness to self is to really start to practice meditation and presence. And it's by doing, and that breathing exercise I did at the beginning where you really slow the exhalation, okay, really calms down the sympathetic nervous system, puts you in that more alpha state, so you can get all the physical, mental benefits and starts to access your own wisdom, okay? Which means you're making wholesome decisions about things rather than frenetic decisions, okay? I can still get it wrong, mind you, but it's never not wholesome. Even the mistakes I make, and I do make them, it's like they're a learning opportunity. It's just another opening, right? So, And presence is by meditation, breathing exercises, being in nature. You all know, I know you love the beach, Minky. The beach, the forests, right, the parks. Okay, so get your shoes off, sit on the earth. Nature will naturally pull you into this present state. It has been shown to reduce the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, okay, if we spend time in nature. So do it, right? It will pull you into presence. So that's a kindness to self. So breathing, meditation, nature. Another thing that will lessen our anxiety on the whole is being accepting of ourselves, okay? Whenever we're, I make mistakes all the time, okay, still, okay? But whenever and we all have patterns, which I'll talk about in a minute, that we need to be honest about and slowly work on shifting, but it's this judgment that we have of ourselves that keeps us wound up, right? And the reason it's so valuable to come to presence is that element of all of us is loving, right? If you have a sense of spirituality, that is our Buddha nature or our Christ light or our divine self. I know it now to be divine love, okay? And it's beautiful. There is nothing more beautiful, okay? I feel it in all of you, okay? And my lovely husband, who's very tired. So that's what you're learning to access. So that's why it is so worth, even though your mind will not want to, you will not want to sit down and meditate, okay? Because we've so got the habit of being busy. And it feels a little threatening to our ego mind to start to sink into this space that's more, how do I describe it? Well, sort of, it's calm, and it's peaceful, but it doesn't feel to the mind like it's going to be that. It's a little bit scary almost, or threatening for the mind. Plus, we have to face our emotions, so fear may come up, sadness may come up, anger, whatever. So all those things are seen as we start to slow down, which is why we don't want to slow down much. But I promise you, you'll be feeling resistant as you walk to your meditation cushion, but within 2 minutes of slowing your breathing and starting to accept whatever's there, you'll feel much better, okay? It's just the initial hurdle of getting there, all right? So the first kindness is presence, because it does all of that, right? The second is honesty. And actually, no, let me talk about the second is responsibility. Now, I know that doesn't sound kind, but it really is. Because responsibility is really empowerment. Because what it means is that everything that's happening in our lives, right, if we fight it and hate it and get really annoyed and, pissed off and why is this happening, universe? Or in other words, we do a little bit of that sort of victimhood stuff or resistance stuff, which all of us are still capable of doing. I can still do that. Okay, when 3 people cancelled today, my first inclination was, but this is meant to be, right? So, and I promise you, there is beauty in this for whatever, I don't even know why, but this is meant to be, okay? So, and the minute we shift from resistance to, okay, acceptance, this is what it is, this is some opportunity, I'm just going to work with it, already our mood state is shifting, right? So, and also it's about seeing that if something is happening in our lives, and that's when I get to honesty next, if something is happening in our lives recurrently that we're struggling with, the opportunity is to say, well, in some way this is coming from me because I am responsible for creating my life, okay? And that's what I mean by empowerment. So many of us will have patterns, like I used to be a people pleaser. I used to want to never say no, not set boundaries, not do, and of course I was always overwhelmed, right? And until I learned to take responsibility for that and see that, I wasn't empowered to shift it, right? But when we realise, no, it's us. I mean, yes, people do things to us that are disrespectful or unwholesome or whatever, but then the opportunity might be to stand up for ourselves, right? Or to move away from that person if we need to, or not to judge them, but just to... So responsibility is empowerment, right? And that's why it's a kindness to self, okay? So there's that. And then, and it's also, it's responsibility in the seeing what it is that we need to change, and in the I'm going to welcome life as an opportunity rather than resisting it and fighting it, and okay? And then the third one is honesty. And the truth is, until we're really honest with ourselves, again, we can't be empowered to change our lives, okay? And that means seeing our nature, seeing our darkness, you know, our annoying habits, right? And seeing our light, the good bits as well. So all the things that so I can still be, you know, I can still be a grumpy wife, can't I, dear? I can, right? I can still take, yeah, very rarely. No, but, you know, until I face my shit, for want of a better word, right? I'm not going to be able to change it, okay? And inevitably, if I'm grumpy with Dan for no reason, I mean, sometimes he might deserve a few boundaries, but if, you know, for no reason, if I'm grumpy with Dan, then it's coming from me. I've got vulnerability, I've got fear, I've got overwhelm, I've got anger, whatever it is, okay? And we've got to be able to see that. And quite often we don't see that because we are so busy being busy and keeping going and wanting to blame everyone else, right? We're not wanting to see what's our stuff. And we do have to slow down and sometimes really sink in to be able to see that and to realise, oh yeah, okay, I'm just feeling vulnerable, aren't I? Right, that's why I'm grumpy, or that's why I'm more picky on my kids than I need to be, or I'm kicking the dog, or I'm whatever I'm doing. Grumpy with my mother, who's lovely. So whatever it is, right? So honesty is really important. And the other thing about honesty is to start seeing these patterns. So one thing I am going to get you to tune into in a minute is to anything that you think could be happening recurrently in your life. And it's not about judging yourself. It's about seeing, okay, if I don't know, conflicts happening in my relationships, or what's a more common one? A more common one is overwhelm. People coming into me feeling very overwhelmed in their life, okay? And that usually is, it'll be, and the patterns they might need to tune into, it'll be too higher expectations, pushing themselves too hard. It'll be not saying no, not setting boundaries, not standing up and disappointing someone, you know, if they need to say no, or they need to set a, you know, step back or whatever it is, be more clear about the relationship or even leave a relationship, okay? So overwhelm. Depression particularly is often, can be about that, not honouring our core needs. It can also be about if we have fear that's limiting us in the world, in some way it's stopping us offering our value in our workplace maybe, or in our relationships, or because we're scared to be vulnerable, we're scared to get it wrong, we're scared to... Okay, so everything, every feeling we have, every situation we have, will have a pattern within us that we may or may not be willing to see, okay? And it is so important to be able to just see it. Just see it with the greatest of love. Because all of our patterns have developed not because we want them to develop, but because of our conditioning, because of our parents, because they had the same stuff, okay? Because they were scared, they felt inadequate, they were overwhelmed, and we copped their stuff, okay? So it's never to judge, it's just about seeing it, okay? So for me, what patterns do I still have? So not so long, last year I left medicine for a short period of time, 7 months, because I wanted to move more into spirituality, and I thought that I couldn't do that within medicine, okay? I thought, well, I didn't realise, but I thought I had to leave medicine, and so I did. And of course, it didn't work. Nothing worked, but I did for that 7 months. So, and that was really hard. And I finally realised, oh, I'm actually meant to combine spirituality with medicine, right? But I realised on the day that I realised that I was meant to go back in, I realised, oh, it was fear. I was scared of being judged by my colleagues or of being, in fact, rejected or pushed down, you know. So, and I didn't even see that fear. And I think I'm aware, right? He saw it. And I said, no, it's not that, right? But so, you know, we can miss stuff, right? But I needed to make that mistake because guess what? Now I'm not going to do that again. I really appreciate medicine, okay, even though I am on the fringes of it to a degree. You know, I want to stay in there. I want to connect with my colleagues more. You know, I see what it does for my clients. It's just, and bringing spirituality and medicine together is a beautiful opportunity. I don't know whether it will happen a lot, but who knows, you know. So do you see what I mean? Like, so we can mess stuff up because of deep fears that we're just not willing to see, okay? And that was because for so many years I had already been on the fringes of my profession and I really didn't want to be on the fringes even more, right? So we can have compassion as well because it is tough, a lot of this stuff we're dealing with. And the road forward does tend to require vulnerability, which is actually my next word, right? So the next word is vulnerability. And that is usually when we're changing patterns, right? So it might be that we have to stand up to our boss, or we realise we're not owning our value in our workplace or something and we need to start putting ourselves out there a bit more, or whatever it is. It's scary. It feels vulnerable, right? Or perhaps we need to start saying no to a relative, or if they're really into something like victimhood, they're really into complaining or they're really into bitching or something like that and we don't want to hear it, you know. Maybe we need to set a boundary or just walk away, and that feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel easy, right? So it's very, you know, changing patterns requires vulnerability. And this whole journey into spirit, let me tell you, you know, as I sink and have sunk more and more into that divine essence, you know, it was vulnerable. It has been and still is vulnerable, right? It's nowhere near as bad as it was. But in the first moments when I was shifting from being very identified with this identity into recognising that it's all ultimately spirit. Albert Einstein says that what we think of as matter, or he said, he's not around anymore, but he said that what we think of as matter doesn't really exist. Okay, what we think of as matter is actually energy whose vibration has slowed enough so that we can perceive it, so that the human senses can perceive it. So nothing is really solid. It's all just energy that's vibrating. Okay, so, and in fact, quantum physics tells us that now. That, well, no, I won't go into that. It's too long a story, but it does tell us that, right? But yeah, it does that. So the essence of everything is energy, and the source of that is this divine essence. And after a while, a lot of practice and a lot of facing self, you can start to shift into that in meditation. And it does at first feel somewhat vulnerable, very vulnerable, until you realise how loving it is. Okay, it's a very loving space, right? And this is, you know, I was a Catholic. I grew up Catholic, right? And I did always have a sense of, you know, I thought Jesus was a good guy, you know, but I didn't really relate to the rules, the regulations, the judgments in the Catholic Church, okay? Now, for the first time, I understand spirituality. And it is unconditionally loving. It always has been unconditionally loving. The Church has got that just a wee bit, you know. But they do some good things too. So, and that's what you start to... It's the reason the Dalai Lama, who sits in this space, by the way, is such a joyous being, even in the face of his whole country being taken over by the Chinese. Okay? So, because he rests in this space of divine love, which is beautiful. And he's accepting life as it is. He does still stand up for his people and their plight. He does that everywhere, doesn't stop him, right? It's not about that you have to become this mute being and accept everything. Acceptance is not about not standing up for yourself. It's about non-resistance, right? Not fighting or being annoyed with.
I really like that, actually. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice distinction.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really lovely.
So, where was I? Honesty, vulnerability, and the final one is kindness. Okay? So, and the reason, see, what I know is that space of divine essence, okay, is unconditionally loving. So it doesn't matter for you guys if you are angry, if you are wanting to, you know, chop your neighbour's trees down, or, you know, if you are wanting to think of the worst thing possible, right? Vladimir Putin, I hold him with love every morning, as do a lot of beings. I'm sure the Dalai Lama does as well, right? But because this essence is loving of everything and everybody, there is no judgment, okay? So as we learn to rest into this, we learn to be kind to self, okay? And everybody else as well. In my meditations in the morning now, it's what I do lately, is I hold people like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, is that the Chinese guy's name? Probably got that wrong. Anyway, and Kim Jong-il, Northern Korean guy. Anyway, and the reason I do it because, well, it's good for the planet, but it's actually good for me, and I know it sounds, but as we learn to recognise that every being, no matter what they are, no matter who is held or is, in essence, this divine love, we will also realise that we are also guiltless, innocent, held in love. So it heals us, okay? So next time you're tempted to be judgy or, you know, about something or someone, realise that you're only pulling yourself down, because what it's teaching you is that you are also worthy of judgment, which you're not, right? And it's why, it's not that I'm, you know, Jesus was an enlightened being, and that's why he said, love your brother as you would love yourself. Because it's about healing you, okay? Yeah. It brings you to this recognition that you are entirely innocent. And that doesn't matter. And believe me, on this journey, because it's so vulnerable, when we feel vulnerable and scared, shit comes up, for want of a better word, right? We can get angry and annoyed, and thoughts can go through our head that, you know, on this journey, before I started to get really deep, I thought I was a nice person, right? But when I started to get really deep, as the ego felt more threatened, believe me, in the moments that I was really first letting go, the teacher that was there, Auntie Jinda, who's this, she was trained in Tibet by the Dalai Lama's teacher actually, but she's also an elder of our First Nations people. She's amazing. I was, quite frankly, I was having thoughts of murdering her, okay? Because I was so threatened and cornered in that moment, you know, it was. So you do meet yourself on this journey, right? And we are all that. We all have the capability. And that's why also you can love others, because I know that there, but for the grace of God go I. You know, if I'd had that person's upbringing, or I felt that vulnerable, or that disconnected from love, I'd be wanting to do that too. Do you see what I mean? There's a beautiful saying in, I think it comes from the Course in Miracles, which I love as well, which is, anything that's not love is a cry for love. So any act of, you know, murder or abuse or rape, or it's all just a cry for love. Okay, really. So that's why this journey of learning to not judge others will bring you home, because you guys are all perfect, divine, whole, beautiful, loving beings. Right? Just sometimes you're caught here occasionally, right? But that's not the real essence. The real essence is this divine love, okay? So Now I want you all to talk. And I'll turn this off because I've had done long enough. So.